Being 31 at the end of the year honestly does scare me, training hard enough, but actually it can lead to infertility. This is such an important topic and I'm really glad that people are starting to talk about it more. Recently, Kelsey Kiel went on the Morning Chalk-Up podcast to talk to Lauren about freezing her eggs because she's worried about infertility. She's 31 and her family went through early menopause.
My mom actually went through early menopause. I say early, like she was 32 when they told her she couldn't get pregnant.
Wow.
Yeah, so
That's
I'm
crazy.
over here, I'm 31.
Yeah, I'm almost 31.
And, you know, I don't have a partner right now.
And when you get to the age of 30, it is something that is just on your mind. But unfortunately, I think a lot of women don't really talk about it. I personally related to this a lot because I'm 30. I actually turned 31 this month. And I know I definitely do want kids. And when you start to think about that in your 30s, when you're enjoying your fitness and training, loads of other things come to your mind.
If you looked at my Google history, I mean, I've looked into this before, but I haven't like verbally expressed it with anybody.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't even know, like, well, who do you talk to this about?
I think there are lots of things that we worry about as women and Google and have all of these anxious thoughts about ourselves, but I don't think we talk about it enough. I really recommend going and watching the full podcast. She touches on so many different points.
Typically when we do these ultrasounds, we want to see numbers in the teens. And she only saw 5 follicles with my 1 ovary. So you want to hop on this with your next cycle. Which is crazy because that's how like everything got the ball rolling, and it just like I feel like it snowballed it because it just went so fast.
But she brought up a few things to do with other CrossFit athletes that I think really need highlighting. And they don't necessarily just affect elite athletes, they affect everybody. Kelsey is obviously trained in nutrition and she knows a lot about the menstrual cycle and foods and how your body fat impacts that and the amount of body fat that you have. Kelsey brought up the fact that when she started speaking about freezing her eggs to other athletes in the CrossFit community, a few of them raised the point that they had actually lost their cycle.
She doesn't get a regular period. She's a you know, top end athlete, and it's not normal not to get your period.
And this can be really common with women that have a lower body fat percentage because having less body fat can affect your hormone function. But I think a lot of people don't realise this and they look up to these elite athletes and think they need to be as lean as them. And often within the fitness industry, athletes think that if they lose their cycle then it's a good thing, that they're training hard enough, but actually it can lead to infertility. And even if an athlete stopped competing and tried to gain a bit of body fat in order to return their cycle, fertility might not return straight away. For me, after I lost my cycle and it went a bit all over the place for a while because I was struggling with my eating disorder and I had really low body fat, it took me ages for me to get it back properly. Lauren, who was hosting the Morning Chalk-Up podcast, also spoke about her own experience of losing her cycle, even though she was just training like a regular person in the gym.
Do you like go through phases where you don't get a period? Because I know for me, if I got to a body fat lower than 20%, my menstrual cycle would completely shut down. And I'm not a professional athlete, so I knew like, okay, like I should probably stay a little bit with my body fat a little bit higher.
And I think this is far more common than we think. I've been doing CrossFit for 6 years and I've spoken to a lot of different people, and it is something that I've heard about quite frequently, especially among athletes that are super lean.
Even myself and maybe other people just at my local affiliate, they probably like don't know that that's not normal if you don't get your period regularly, and that like there's ways that maybe you should figure out with like your doctor or a nutritionist, or just ways that like you can stay regular, especially if you are planning on having a family in the future.
The question comes up whether it's just a sacrifice that these elite female athletes have to make.
There's this like give and take of competing at the highest level, but like you also really got to take care of your body and your hormones.
But Kelsey brings up the fact that she helped a couple of these athletes get their cycle back while still managing to be a competitive athlete. Kelsey's doing a great job of trying to break down the stigma, but I think we need to go further with that. A lot of women also don't realise that if you're on hormonal contraceptives, your fertility actually doesn't return immediately after you stop taking them. And on top of that, with those of us that are really obsessed with CrossFit, it can feel like a huge sacrifice to take time out of training to have kids. And at that age when we're at the most competitive, it's also the age where we are most likely to have children. So I'm wondering how many of these athletes are having to balance those two things and thinking like Kelsey, that in the future they're going to want to have kids, but now isn't necessarily the right time, and freezing their eggs might be a possibility for that.
One, periods and all of this is so like a taboo subject that I feel like people aren't talking about it. But I also think that there are a lot of women who compete who are around my age or older, or maybe even a little bit younger, who don't know that this is an option.
But if we don't talk about it and have these discussions, then how is anyone going to know? We've seen several CrossFit athletes like Cara Saunders and Annie come back from giving birth and crush it at the CrossFit Games. So we know it's a possibility that after you get pregnant, then you can continue your training pretty much as normal. It could be quite different for those of us that have like full-time jobs on top of having a family and then trying to fit CrossFit in between that. Speaking to some people recently, it's really noticeable that a lot of us feel the same, really wanting to have kids soon, but also not wanting to take time off training or competing and enjoying ourselves within the CrossFit space. Being 31 at the end of the year honestly does scare me, and I know that fertility doesn't really start to properly decline until you're 35, and women can have children way into their 40s, but it is something that plays on my mind, and I'll only be able to find out in the next couple of years whether having kids is a possibility for me. But it was really comforting for me to hear more women speaking about this openly and to realise that I'm not the only one. At the end of the day, women have a lot of other things to navigate whilst they're doing CrossFit. Our menstrual cycles can have a huge impact on how we can train throughout the month. And on top of that, if we want a family, we have to consider what the right window for that might be, and then how to approach postpartum recovery and comparing yourself to your previous self and everything on top of that. It's a journey that I'm definitely going to go on in the next few years, and I hope you'll be there to follow along and figure it out together. Let me know in the comments below if this is something that you've also worried about yourself, or if you've experienced any of the things that I brought up. Watch this video next on how I train around my menstrual cycle. Thank you for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.